Have you ever wondered what truly sets intelligent men apart, not just in how they think, but in what they choose not to say? Welcome to Stoic Capsule. I'm genuinely glad you're here, because today's conversation could shift the way you view yourself and how others quietly judge you. See, here's the truth. The smartest men in the room rarely prove it with words. They don't flaunt knowledge. They don't dominate conversations. In fact, their greatest strength often lies in knowing when to say nothing at all. Sounds strange, right? But sometimes silence is the sharpest statement you can make. I've spent years observing people through the lens of ancient Stoic teachings, and over countless cups of coffee in everyday places where human behavior unfolds, unscripted. And if there's one pattern I've seen again and again, it's this. The wisest men don't waste breath. They listen more than they speak. They understand that a single careless phrase can do lasting damage to their credibility. That's why today we're unpacking 7 things intelligent men never say. Not because they're perfect, but because they've learned, often through failure, that these phrases sabotage respect, trust, and personal growth. Let's begin with one of the most deceptively dangerous lines. Number 1, I already know that. Harmless? Confident? Maybe. But beneath the surface, this phrase carries a dangerous message. My mind is closed. An intelligent man knows better. He knows that the moment you believe there's nothing left to learn, you've slammed the door shut on growth. I learned this lesson the hard way. Years ago, I was working with a mentor, an older man, calm and wise, the kind of presence that didn't need to shout to be heard. We were reviewing a task I'd done 100 times before. As he started offering advice, I interrupted him, blurting out, "Yeah, I know that already." He paused, gave me a look steady, unreadable, and then quietly moved on. Only later did it hit me. I hadn't just cut him off. I had cut myself off from the chance to see something deeper, something only years of experience could reveal. What he knew wasn't written in manuals. It wasn't on YouTube. It lived in the quiet corners of lived experience. When we say, "I already know that," we're not just showing confidence. We're revealing a fragile ego disguised as mastery. And that's not intelligence, that's arrogance, camouflaged as competence. The Stoics warned us about this trap. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You cannot learn anything when you think you already know everything." Ego is the enemy. It whispers that we're standing on solid ground, when really, we're just balancing on pride. True intelligence is fluid. It sees knowledge not as a trophy to be displayed, but as a river, always flowing, always evolving. Step into it twice, and the water is never the same. I once watched an old carpenter quietly listen to a young apprentice explain a technique he'd likely perfected 30 years earlier. He nodded, asked thoughtful questions, and even thanked him. Curious, I asked him why he didn't just correct the kid. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stay quiet and listen. As we saw earlier, choosing not to interrupt might just open the door to unexpected wisdom. I remember asking that same seasoned carpenter why he let the apprentice talk through a technique he surely knew inside and out. He smiled and said something That stuck with me, because sometimes you learn more by listening to the way someone else sees it. That is wisdom. And it's a quiet kind of intelligence, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself out loud. So next time you find yourself thinking, "I've heard this before," take a breath. Stay open, not to be polite, not to stroke someone's ego, but because there might be a hidden gem waiting for you. A detail you missed, a new lens on an old idea. A subtle shift in perspective that deepens your understanding. And even if nothing new comes, there's still something powerful happening. You're practicing humility. You're showing respect. And those habits build something far more valuable over time. They make you the kind of person others want to listen to. In Stoic philosophy, we call that mastery of the self, the discipline to put ego aside in favor of clarity, the strength to remain a lifelong student of life. That kind of intelligence, it doesn't fade. It grows deeper with time. Now let's talk about the second phrase intelligent men avoid. Number 2, that's impossible. Several years ago, I worked with a man named Robert. He was sharp, composed, and deeply respected, the type of leader who looked like he carried the whole company on his back without ever breaking a sweat. But there was one thing he said often, too often: "That's impossible." Anytime a bold idea surfaced, whether it was expanding into a new market, improving an outdated system, or simply reaching out to a difficult client, Robert shut it down without hesitation. At first, it seemed practical, grounded, even wise. After all, who has time to waste chasing unrealistic dreams? Over time, the truth became clearer. Every time Robert said, "That's impossible," it wasn't the task he was describing, it was himself, his own fears, his self-imposed limits. The Stoics had a name for this. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And that's exactly what Robert was doing. He wasn't evaluating the idea rationally, he was projecting his fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of looking foolish, fear of trying and falling short. But the thing about this fear, it's quiet. It doesn't scream. It shows up disguised as logic, as caution, as practicality. And in that disguise, it convinces us to stay small, to stand still unless we can see the whole path ahead. But Stoicism teaches us something radically different. The obstacle is never the enemy. Our perception of the obstacle is. Years later, I joined a high-stakes project, tiny budget, tight timeline, and a team with barely enough experience to pull it off. Every instinct told me it couldn't be done. But instead of saying "that's impossible," I asked a different question. What can I do today? What's the next step I can take? We didn't achieve a miracle. We didn't magically grow the budget or gain more time. But we made it work because we refused to be paralyzed by the scale of the challenge. We kept moving, one step, then the next. Marcus Aurelius put it best. You have power over your mind, not outside events. And that truth made all the difference. So when a man says "that's impossible," he's not just predicting failure, he's surrendering before the first move. Intelligent men don't do that. They understand that impossible often just means unfamiliar. It's not a wall. It's an invitation and the brave step forward. True courage isn't about winning every battle, it's about showing up again and again. Even when the odds seem impossibly high. That's the heart of Stoic bravery, not blind optimism, but disciplined persistence. Life constantly calls us to face hard things, and the moment we declare something as impossible, we don't just close off a challenge, we shut a door on ourselves. But the man who trains himself to take one small step forward, especially when everything feels overwhelming, often finds doors others don't even notice. That's more than intelligence. That's wisdom earned through effort. Now let's talk about the third phrase intelligent men avoid. Number 3, that's not my fault. It might sound harmless, just a basic self-defense, right? But truthfully, it's one of the most damaging things a man can say. Because while it may feel justified in the moment when things go wrong at work, in a relationship, or in life, it quietly gives away something precious, your power. It's human nature to want to protect ourselves when mistakes happen. We point fingers. We distance ourselves from blame. But here's the Stoic truth. Every time you push responsibility away, you also push away the ability to influence the outcome. Intelligent men see this clearly. They've learned that responsibility isn't about guilt, it's about leverage. When you own even a small piece of a problem, you give yourself a foothold in the solution. I remember a close friend of mine, Michael, who once lost a major client. His first reaction, defensiveness. He blamed the client's bad attitude, the shifting market, his team's missed deadlines, and honestly, he wasn't wrong. Those things did happen. But while Michael was busy defending himself, the chance to actually learn from the experience slipped right through his fingers. Instead of adapting, he repeated the same patterns, convinced the world was always at fault, never him. What he didn't realize is this: by refusing to own any part of the problem, he gave up the only thing he could actually control himself. The Stoics were crystal clear on this. They taught us to focus only on what lies within our control and let go of the rest. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And that's the heart of it. When we say that's not my fault, we hand the power to change the situation over to someone else. We wait for them to fix it, for them to apologize, for them to do better. But when we accept even a sliver of responsibility, we instantly shift. We go from waiting to acting, from helpless to powerful. I've seen this in my own life. Owning my part, however small, often led to insights I never would have uncovered otherwise. Maybe I didn't communicate clearly. Maybe I should have asked more questions. Even when others made bigger mistakes, my willingness to take ownership opened new paths. That shift builds trust with others and with yourself. Because when you stop blaming and start owning, you stop waiting for someone to rescue you. You become the one who leads forward. Blame is easy. Responsibility is hard. But responsibility is where strength lives. The Stoics remind us, life isn't about escaping hardship, it's about rising above it. And rising begins the moment you ask yourself, what could I do differently next time? That's how intelligent men lead. Not by pointing fingers, but by finding the next step forward. And if any of this resonated with you, drop a yes in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, on to the next trap. I don't need any help. It sounds noble, doesn't it? Strong, independent. Let's talk about the fourth phrase intelligent men avoid. Number 4, I don't need any help. It sounds strong, doesn't it? It echoes with pride, with grit like something carved into the mythology of the lone wolf. The self-made man who walks his path in silence, never asking, never depending. In many cultures, especially in the West, we're taught to admire this image, to carry our burdens quietly, to tough it out. But beneath that romantic idea lies a very different truth, more often than not. The refusal to ask for help isn't a sign of strength. It's a symptom of pride, quiet, invisible, and deeply corrosive. It isolates us. It convinces us that struggling alone is noble, and slowly, it eats away at the very resilience we believe we're protecting. I was reminded of this when I came across something about Abraham Lincoln, one of the most revered leaders in history. We often picture him as solitary and somber, burdened with the weight of a divided nation during the darkest days of the Civil War. Stoic, alone, unshakable. But the reality was far more human and far more powerful. Lincoln surrounded himself with advisors who challenged him. He deliberately sought out perspectives that clashed with his own, not because he doubted his convictions, but because he knew that true wisdom doesn't arise from isolation. It grows when you have the courage to admit that you don't know everything. During the bloodshed at Antietam, one of the war's deadliest battles, Lincoln personally visited General McClellan despite their tensions and disagreements. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was seeking insight, strategy, perspective, and his cabinet. They were famously known as the team of rivals because he wanted to be surrounded by strong, differing voices. That wasn't weakness. That was humility in action. That was strength shaped by openness. Intelligent men figure this out sooner or later. Self-reliance is valuable, but it was never meant to be absolute. Even Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man of his time, didn't pretend to have all the answers. In his meditations, he carefully listed the many people he had learned from mentors, friends, teachers. He acknowledged each lesson with gratitude. He wasn't just writing philosophy, he was honoring those who shaped him. So why do we think we have to carry everything alone? Somewhere along the way, we started believing that asking for help equals failure, that needing support means we're not strong enough, that if we admit we're overwhelmed, we've somehow lost. But that belief is a trap. It locks us inside our own heads. It convinces us that our problems are ours to carry in silence. And worst of all, it robs others of the opportunity to give. When you don't ask for help, you deny someone else the chance to be generous, to support you, to walk with you. You cut off the very connections that make us human. I've been there myself. There was a time when I tried to hold everything: work stress, family responsibilities, the pressure to live up to this image of always being composed. I told myself that strength meant handling it alone. But it didn't make me stronger. It made me tired. The turning point came when I finally opened up to someone I trusted. I told them I couldn't keep doing it all by myself. And what I received wasn't judgment, it was understanding, support, encouragement. That single moment of honesty gave me back clarity I hadn't felt in years. I realized something simple but profound. True strength isn't how long you can stand alone. It's knowing when to reach out and when to accept a hand offered to you. The Stoics were clear. We are not isolated beings. We are built for cooperation, for mutual support. Epictetus reminds us, no man is an island. To pretend otherwise is to go against the very nature of life itself. True strength, as we just explored, isn't diminished by asking for help, it's defined by it. Because asking for help demands something rare, courage and honesty. And those, not bravado, are the real marks of an intelligent and wise man, someone who knows that carrying every burden alone isn't noble. It's simply unnecessary. So the next time you feel that stubborn voice inside saying, "I've got this, I don't need anyone," pause. Ask yourself, is that really strength speaking? Or is it just pride in disguise? And remember Lincoln not as a lone figure, but as a man who led through wisdom and humility, aware that even the strongest leaders stand taller when they stand with others. Now let's talk about the fifth phrase intelligent men never say. Number 5, I'm too old for that. It's one of the most quietly destructive lies a man can tell himself. It often slips out in the form of a joke or a shrug meant to look practical. Sometimes it's masked as humility or realism. But underneath, it carries something much heavier, resignation, the belief that the best parts of life are behind us and the time to grow, to try, to pursue has passed. That mindset doesn't just limit us. It slowly drains purpose from our days. It becomes a soft, persistent voice whispering, "Why bother?" And over time, it convinces us to shrink, to step back, to stop engaging with the life that's still unfolding. But intelligent men recognize this phrase for what it really is: toxic thinking. A trap that closes doors far too early. I once read about a man named Harry Bernstein. At the age of 93, 93 after a full life spent as a magazine editor, a husband, and a father, he decided to write his very first book. It was a memoir about his childhood in a poor English town divided by religion and prejudice. The book, The Invisible Wall, was rejected multiple times, but Harry persisted, and when he was 96, it finally hit the shelves. Not only was it published, it became an international success, translated into many languages, touching lives all around the world. And you know what? He didn't stop there. Harry went on to write 3 more books after that. What moved me most about Harry's story wasn't just the accomplishment, it was the courage. The courage to believe that life still had more for him, that even in his 90s, he hadn't finished growing, learning, or contributing. And here's the thing. That kind of courage isn't reserved for someone exceptional. It's available to all of us right now. Every day, we face a choice. Do we listen to the voice that says, "You've missed your chance"? Or do we choose to believe that as long as we're still breathing, we still have purpose? The Stoics were clear. Age means nothing to the soul. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this constantly. Yes, death is inevitable, but until it arrives, Our duty is to live fully and act virtuously. He didn't see age as a decline but as a deepening, a refining of character. Wisdom doesn't appear just because we get older. It grows in those who remain curious. It ripens in those who stay courageous. I've seen it firsthand. Men in their 60s learning new trades, launching businesses, mentoring younger leaders. I've also seen others same age who let regret and fear convince them to withdraw from the world. The difference wasn't time. It was mindset. The man who says, "I'm too old for that," has already closed the door. But the man who asks, "What can I do now?" he's already swinging that door wide open. Because age doesn't disqualify us from living boldly, it qualifies us to live with more clarity, more depth, more to offer. Experience, perspective, resilience. These aren't signs that a man's journey is over. They're the tools of someone who's just getting started. And that is the Stoic path: to keep showing up, to keep learning, to keep becoming. We ended with a reminder that age is no barrier to growth, that as long as we're alive, there's still more to learn, more to give, and more to become. So keep learning, keep striving, right up until your final breath, because as long as we're here, there is still work worth doing. If any of what you've heard so far has struck a chord, do me a favor, give this video a like, and make sure to subscribe. Because every time I discover a new perspective that can change how we live, I want you to be the first to hear it. Now, let's move to the 6th phrase intelligent men avoid. Number 6, I'll do it later. Few phrases are more seductive and more dangerous than this one. I'll do it later. It sounds harmless, responsible, even like a reasonable delay, a quiet promise to ourselves. I'll get to it eventually. But here's the truth most of us don't want to admit. Later is the graveyard of our best intentions. Wise men, those who have lived, failed, and learned to understand this clearly. Many have come to realize, often too late, that postponing what matters doesn't buy you time. It steals it every time we whisper, "I'll call tomorrow. I'll apologize next week. I'll start that project once things settle down." We're making a bet we can't guarantee. We're gambling with the one thing we have no control over: time. I remember a man named Thomas. From the outside, he had it all: an impressive business, a beautiful family, deep respect in his community. But he was always busy. He told himself he'd spend more time with his aging father later, once work calmed down, once things weren't so hectic. The fishing trip they'd planned, postponed. The phone calls, delayed. Just sitting together to talk soon, he promised. But one day, later ran out. His father passed away unexpectedly, and Thomas was left with a phone full of unsent messages and a heart heavy with words never spoken. He shared this story with me years later, not looking for sympathy, but to offer a warning. We all think we have time until we don't. The Stoics didn't sugarcoat this reality. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every single day of one uncomfortable truth: not to be grim, but to keep his urgency sharp. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That's not just philosophy. It's practice. It's perspective. It's the mindset of intelligent men who know the clock isn't in their control. Time doesn't wait for clarity, or convenience, or courage. What you delay today may be lost forever tomorrow. That's why wise men act now. They make the call they've been avoiding. They take the awkward step toward mending a broken relationship. They begin the project that's been collecting dust in the back of their mind. Not because it's easy, but because they know waiting for the perfect moment is a lie that almost always costs more than it gives. I've lived this too. There were hard conversations I postponed because I didn't want discomfort. Letters I never wrote because I thought there'd be more time. But when I finally stopped waiting and acted, something shifted. The weight lifted. Regret gave way to relief. Clarity returned, and I realized it's not intention that shapes our legacy, it's action. The Stoics urge us, live now, fully, urgently, honestly, because later is an illusion, a soft blanket that keeps us warm until it's suddenly too late. Taught the man who acts today, who refuses to leave the important things undone, is the man who lives with peace not because he avoided risk, but because he didn't waste his time. That is true wisdom. Because opportunity, it rarely knocks twice. It fades quietly while we're busy waiting for the right time. Now, let's talk about the seventh and final phrase. That's just how I am. We've talked about urgency, about not waiting, about stepping forward instead of holding back. But what if the thing holding us back is the belief that we can't change? That brings us to the final phrase intelligent men avoid. Number 7, that's just how I am. At first, it sounds honest, even final, like a full stop at the end of a sentence. But in truth, it's not a declaration of identity, it's a quiet surrender. It's a man giving up the fight for growth before it even begins. Wise men recognize the danger in this mindset, because here's the truth. We are not fixed. We are not forever bound to our worst habits, our old labels, or our past selves. We are shaped and reshaped by what we choose to do, again and again. The moment a man says, I can't change, he's not making a statement of fact. He's avoiding responsibility. I've seen it countless times. A man who loses his temper regularly, then shrugs it off with, that's just how I am. Another man avoids emotional depth, scared of vulnerability, and tells himself, that's just who I've always been. But these aren't truths. They're excuses. They allow fear to wear the mask of honesty. They let comfort and avoidance parade as self-awareness at their core. They reveal resistance. Resistance to discomfort. Resistance to accountability. Resistance to the hard, messy, beautiful work of becoming someone better. The Stoics didn't tiptoe around this truth. They looked it in the eye. They believed we are not prisoners to our past, our impulses, or our personality types. As Epictetus said, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Likewise, it's not our nature that limits us, it's the stories we repeat about ourselves. Change is uncomfortable. It forces us to examine what we've always accepted. It demands that we let go of the familiar even when that familiarity has become painful. But Stoic philosophy reminds us self-mastery is the highest goal. Not because it's easy, but because without it, a meaningful life is impossible. True growth begins with honesty, with asking the harder questions. Am I acting this way because it's truly who I am, or because it's easier than changing? Intelligent men choose the more difficult path, not because they hate who they are, but because they respect themselves too much to stay the same. Because in the end, that's just how I am doesn't close a chapter, it closes the book. And life, by its very nature, is change. To resist change is to resist being fully alive. The man who understands this doesn't fear growth, he welcomes it. He sees himself not as a finished product, but as a work in progress, unfinished, but willing. And in that willingness lies true wisdom. If you've ever caught yourself saying one of these 7 phrases, trust me, you're not alone. I've been there more times than I'd like to admit. But the beauty of intelligence isn't in never making mistakes. It's in recognizing them and choosing to do better. And that's exactly what we're doing here. One thoughtful choice at a time. So, which phrase hit home for you today? Was it that's just how I am that needs to be left behind? Or maybe it's finally retiring, I'll do it later, before later becomes never. Whatever it is, let this be your invitation to take one small step forward, to let go of who you've been, in order to become who you're meant to be. Because wisdom isn't about being perfect. It's about staying curious, staying humble, and always moving forward. If today's conversation sparked something in you, pass it on. Share this video with someone walking this same path. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your reflections. And if you haven't already, hit that like button. Subscribe to Stoic Capsule, because every time I find a new insight on how to live better, I want you to be the first to hear it. See you in the next video. Stay grounded, stay growing, stay stoic.